They mocked me and my cheap-looking gift. They had no idea. Inside that box was the foreclosure notice for the house they were standing in, a house I had just bought. Before the story begins, please write in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so the channel's Stories with Meaning can continue to grow and bring you more powerful stories. It was 9 a.m., and Clara's apartment was flooded with sunlight. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the bustling cityscape of New York below, yet inside her minimalist penthouse, there was only silence. Clara stood before the full-length mirror in her walk-in closet, smoothing the folds of her navy blue silk dress. It was simple, without any flashy logos, yet its price alone could cover 6 months of mortgage payments. A quiet luxury, one she had learned to hide, just like the rest of her life. On her bed lay a box. It wasn't large, about the size of a shoebox, but it was wrapped in deep black velvet paper, soft and luxurious beneath her fingers. A simple silver ribbon tied it neatly. It was a gift for her parents' 30th wedding anniversary. Clara exhaled slowly. The aroma of her expensive morning coffee mixed with her subtle perfume. That familiar feeling crept in again, a blend of foolish hope and inevitable dread. Maybe this time will be different. A lie she told herself every year, every birthday, every holiday, every celebration. She would come bearing a carefully chosen gift, hoping for a nod of acknowledgement, a genuine smile, or a hug that didn't feel obligatory. And every time she would leave feeling emptier than before. She remembered her master's graduation 5 years earlier. She had graduated summa cum laude. Her parents attended, but spent the entire dinner talking about Lucas, her older brother, who was this close to closing a major business deal. They never asked about her thesis. But today's gift was different. This wasn't a designer gown for her mother or a luxury watch for her father. This gift was everything. It was the result of 5 years of silent work, sleepless nights, and carefully calculated risks. It was a statement, an answer to every doubt they had ever cast on her. Clara picked up the box. It felt heavy in her hands, far heavier than its size suggested. Heavy with expectation, heavy with meaning. She knew exactly how the party would unfold. Her mother, Helena, would be the queen, draped in dazzling jewelry, offering subtle complaints about the trouble of hosting while boasting about the catering costs. Her father, Victor, would stand with a glass of whiskey, nodding at business associates, playing the role of the successful patriarch. And Lucas, the golden child, would command the spotlight, telling unfunny jokes and radiating his hollow charm. And then there would be Clara, a shadow in the corner. "Clara, sweetheart," her mother would say in that artificially sweet voice, loud enough for guests to hear, "get me another drink." She shook the memory away. Today would be different. It had to be. She checked her reflection one last time. Her hair was flawless, her makeup impeccable. She looked calm, composed, successful. Everything they should have been proud of. "Let's get this over with," she whispered. She placed the box into a matching tote bag and stepped out of her silent penthouse, heading toward the noise of her parents' home. Her childhood home stood in an equally upscale neighborhood, yet it felt like a different world altogether. If Clara's apartment embodied quiet, modern luxury, her parents' house screamed forced grandeur. Fake Roman-style pillars framed the front porch, and the white paint was peeling in places. The backyard had been transformed into a party venue, rows of white tents, uniformed servers circulating with champagne trays, and soft classical music playing through hidden speakers. At least 100 guests had arrived, all dressed in their finest, laughing too loudly. The moment Clara stepped in, she felt cold. The first person she saw was her mother. Helena wore a shimmering burgundy evening gown, a diamond necklace wrapped tightly around her neck. She was laughing with a group of women. That laugh, the one Clara knew, was fake. Clara, Helena called, waving lazily. The laughter vanished from her eyes. Clara, finally, guests have been asking where my only daughter is. Clara leaned in to kiss her mother's cheek, but Helena subtly turned away, already refocusing on another guest. Sorry, Mom, traffic was bad. There's always an excuse, Helena muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Go find your father and try to mingle. Don't stand in the corner like you always do. You make people uncomfortable. Clara nodded stiffly. Happy anniversary, Mom. Yes, yes, thank you. Helena had already turned away. The guest's eyes followed Clara, curiosity mixed with pity. She was the other daughter, the one never mentioned. She found her father near the makeshift bar. Victor was tall, his graying hair slicked neatly back. He looked sharp in his suit, but his eyes were tired. Dad. He glanced over, expression unchanged. Clara, you're here. Happy anniversary. Thanks. He took another whiskey from a server's tray. I'm busy, Clara. Important contacts here. Don't cause trouble. I won't. He patted her awkwardly on the shoulder and immediately turned to greet a man who looked influential. Clara stood alone. This was her reality. Lavish food, expensive decorations, money flowing freely. And she knew better than anyone else that it was all an illusion. She knew exactly how much debt her father was drowning in. She knew those important contacts were desperate attempts at bailouts. Then she saw Lucas. He stood at the center of the crowd, tall, handsome in a lazy way, wearing a suit far too flashy. He was telling a story about his tech startup, a venture Clara knew was entirely funded by her father's depleted retirement savings and producing nothing but bills. Lucas spotted Clara and raised his glass with a mocking grin. Hey, Claire, didn't expect you. Thought you'd be too busy counting pennies at that boring job of yours. Laughter erupted around him. Clara said nothing. Her gaze fell on the expensive new watch on his wrist. Dad's money again. She turned away and walked toward a quieter corner near the pool, gripping her tote bag tightly. The box inside felt heavier by the minute. An hour passed in slow agony. She endured small talk with distant relatives asking when she planned to get married. Mostly she observed. She watched her mother praise Lucas to anyone willing to listen. Oh, our Lucas is brilliant. His startup is about to explode. Investors from California are very interested. Clara knew those investors were desperate online lenders with crushing interest rates, ones she had personally traced. Finally, the moment arrived. The MC asked for everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to celebrate the love of our wonderful couple, Victor and Helena, and I hear there are special gifts from their beloved children. Victor and Helena sat on two throne-like chairs beneath the stage lights, beaming. Lucas went first. Of course he did. He climbed onto the stage confidently, microphone in hand. Mom, Dad, he began, his voice heavy with manufactured emotion. 30 years is a long time. You've given me everything, and as a small token of my gratitude, an assistant brought out a large box bearing the logo of a luxury watch brand. The guests murmured in awe. Lucas opened it. Inside lay a matching pair of gold watches glittering under the lights. Limited edition, Lucas announced proudly. Only 100 pairs in the world. Helena gasped, covering her mouth. Oh my God, Lucas, this is beautiful. It must have cost a fortune. Nothing is too expensive for you, Lucas said, hugging her. Victor stood, clapping Lucas hard on the back, his eyes misty. This is my son. You always know how to make us proud. Incredible. Thunderous applause filled the space. Lucas soaked it in. Then the MC glanced at his notes. And now we also have a gift from our beloved daughter, Miss Clara. Silence fell. The cheerful atmosphere turned awkward. The spotlight swung toward her. Helena and Victor were still admiring their watches when their expressions flattened, as if the best part of the night had already passed. Clara stepped forward. She didn't climb the stage, she simply walked to the front, tote bag in hand. She could hear the whispers. "Oh, Clara brought a gift too," someone murmured. What could she possibly give? A photo frame? She pulled out the black velvet box. Compared to Lucas's flashy watch box, hers looked small, plain, insignificant. Lucas, still standing on the stage, let out a soft scoff, just loud enough for the people in front to hear. Clara ignored him. She stood before her parents. "Happy anniversary, Mom, Dad," she said. Her voice was clear and steady in the tense silence. She held out the box. Victor stared at it, then at Clara. He made no move to take it. Helena carefully removed her new watch and placed it beside her. Her gaze locked onto the black box in Clara's hands, cold enough to freeze fire. "What is this?" Helena asked. Her voice was no longer sweet for the guests. It was sharp, cold. "A gift," Clara replied simply, "for both of you." Helena let out a short, bitter laugh. "A gift?" She lifted her wrist, now adorned with the gold watch. "After what Lucas just gave us, you think we'd be interested in that?" Clara remained silent. Her arms stayed extended. Guests began to whisper. The silence dragged. Too long, too awkward. Helena felt embarrassed that her daughter had brought something that looked cheap in front of her social circle. Keep it," Helena said, waving her hand as if swatting a fly. "Don't embarrass yourself." "Mom," Clara said calmly, "please, just open it." Something about Clara's calmness ignited Helena's anger even more. Maybe because Clara didn't look ashamed. Maybe because she wasn't trembling. "Embarrass us?" Helena hissed, her fury now unmistakable. "You think bringing this little box makes up for all the disappointments you've caused us? You think this makes us forget who you are?" Clara inhaled slowly. "I don't understand what you mean." "Oh, you don't?" Helena laughed, her voice rising. "You think we forgot? You think we forgot that you were never supposed to be here?" Victor looked at his wife, panic flickering in his eyes. "Helena, not here. There are people." "Why not?" Helena shouted, fully losing control. She pointed at Clara with a trembling finger. "Let everyone know. Let them all know that you are the child we never wanted." Time seemed to stop. The classical music fell silent. The servers froze. 100 pairs of eyes locked onto Clara. Helena stood there, gasping, her chest rising and falling with rage. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. The child we never wanted? It wasn't new. She had heard variations of it her entire life, through sighs of frustration, unfair treatment, constant neglect. But never this clearly, never this loudly, never in front of so many people. She looked at Lucas, standing behind her mother. He wasn't shocked. He looked entertained. A faint smile played on his lips. She looked at her father. Victor didn't defend her. He didn't say, "That's not true." He stared at the floor, his face burning red, not from shame over his wife's cruelty, but from the spectacle itself. And then something strange happened. Clara had expected pain, tears, the urge to run. Instead, she felt relief, as if the breath she had been holding for 30 years was finally released, as if the weight of her foolish hope had lifted from her shoulders. "So this is the truth," she thought. Clara slowly lowered her arm, still holding the box. Seeing that Clara neither cried nor fled only fueled Helena's rage. Her daughter's silence felt like an accusation. Victor finally stepped forward. His pride was on the line. His face hardened like granite as he looked not at his wife, but at Clara. "Your mother is right," he said in a low, growling voice. He didn't deny the accusation. He continued, "What is all this drama for, Clara? You know we're celebrating. You know Lucas just gave us something extraordinary, and you show up with this?" He pointed at the black velvet box with disdain. "We don't need your cheap gift." The word hung in the air. Cheap. Victor's eyes were cold. "Take your thing and leave. You've ruined our party enough." It was a command, an expulsion. Clara stared at him, the man she had tried to make proud her entire life, the man's business she had secretly saved from total collapse. She looked at her mother, the woman whose love she had longed for, the woman who called her an accident. She looked at Lucas, grinning in triumph. And then she laughed. It didn't start as laughter. It began as a restrained pfft. Then her shoulders started shaking. She covered her mouth, trying to stop it, but it was useless. The laughter burst out, clear, loud, and completely humorless. It was the laughter born of absolute irony, the laughter of someone who had just heard the most absurd joke in the universe. The guests were stunned. Helena and Victor froze. Their anger turned to genuine confusion. Lucas's grin vanished. "Why are you laughing?" Helena demanded, her voice shaking. "Have you lost your mind? We insult you and you laugh?" Clara lifted her head. Tears streamed down her face, but not from sadness. They were tears of uncontrollable laughter. Her smile was wide, but it never reached her eyes. Her eyes were ice cold. "I'm laughing, Mom," Clara said, her voice slicing through the silence. "I'm laughing because of you." She stepped forward and gently placed the black velvet box on the table before their throne-like chairs, right next to Lucas's flashy watch box. "Cheap," she repeated softly, amusement still lingering. "You call this cheap." She met her father's eyes, then her mother's. "I truly have no idea," she whispered almost to herself. "You're sitting there showing off watches bought with debt in a house that's about to be foreclosed, celebrating lies, and you mock me?" Her laughter faded, replaced with a terrifying calm. "I'm going to open this box." Her voice echoed across the silent garden. "And when I do, you will beg me for forgiveness." Her hand rested on the silver ribbon. "Are you sure?" she asked, giving them one last chance. "You really don't want to see what's inside this cheap gift?" The garden was deathly silent, as if all the air had been sucked out. 100 guests held their breath. Helena recovered first, her face, pale with confusion, flushed red with raw anger. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you come to our celebration after everything we've given you? Laugh at us? Humiliate us in front of our friends? Given you?" "Given you?" Clara echoed quietly, almost curious. She paused, letting Helena's earlier words linger between them. "The child we never wanted." Victor stepped forward, posture stiff with wounded pride. "That's enough, Clara. End this nonsense. Take your box and leave. Now." "Nonsense?" Clara tilted her head. "That's what you call this, and you call my gift cheap." She pointed at the velvet box. "I'm laughing, Dad, because of the irony. You're sitting here drowning in debt, wearing watches bought with money you don't have, in a house that's about to be foreclosed, celebrating lies, and you mock me." "Watch your mouth," Victor thundered. He turned to the guests, trying to regain control. "Please excuse our daughter. She's not well. She's always been dramatic." "Dramatic?" Clara nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I'm not lying." She scanned the curious, judgmental faces around her. "You all came here to celebrate their 30-year marriage. You see luxury, but you know what I see? I see two people so terrified of losing their masks that they'd rather destroy the only person who could actually save them." Lucas laughed nervously from the stage. "Clara, Clara, you're hilarious. Who do you think you are? You can't even keep a decent corporate job. You're going to save us with what? Your assistant manager salary?" It was an old insult, a lie Clara had allowed them to believe. She turned her eyes to Lucas. "Of everyone here," she said quietly, "you should be the one staying silent." Her gaze was sharp, filled not with anger, but with knowledge. Lucas faltered. His smile faded. "I'm laughing," Clara continued softly, answering her mother at last, "because today you insulted me for being cheap and unwanted. And yet, ironically, the cheap gift from the unwanted child is the only thing standing between you and complete ruin." She tapped the box once. "And the best part? You don't even realize it. You're too busy worshiping your failed golden child." Victor slammed the phone down. "Just a few scratches," he snapped. "But it was my car, my brand new BMW. He took it without permission and wrapped it around a tree." That was when Lucas, 19 at the time, walked in. He looked fine. A slight bruise on his cheek, nothing more. What stood out most was his expression, sulky, irritated, as if he were the victim. "The tree came out of nowhere," Lucas muttered. Clara expected anger. She expected shouting. Instead, Helena ran to Lucas and wrapped him in a tight embrace. "Oh, sweetheart, thank God you're okay. You scared me half to death." "I'm fine, Mom, let go," Lucas said, gently pushing her away. Victor pointed at him. "You're lucky you're not hurt. Your allowance is suspended for 1 month." That was it. 1 month without spending money for a car worth hundreds of thousands of dollars destroyed. Then Victor's gaze shifted to Clara, who was still standing in the foyer, her bag in hand. "And you?" Victor barked. "Where have you been? Your brother is in serious trouble, and you're off wandering around?" Clara froze. "Dad, I was in Chicago, the competition." She crouched down, unzipped her bag, and carefully pulled out the gleaming silver trophy. "I won," she said softly. "Second place, national level." She looked up at her father, eyes full of hope. Victor glanced at the trophy for less than a second. He snorted. "Second place? Why not first?" He waved his hand impatiently. "Good, very good, Clara. Can you move aside? I've got real problems to deal with." He walked past her, clapping Lucas on the shoulder. "Come on, son. We need to call the insurance company. Your mother will make you some hot chocolate." Clara was left alone in the foyer. She looked down at the trophy in her hands, the symbol of her greatest achievement. Then she looked into the living room, where Helena was stroking Lucas's hair as he complained about how unfair the tree had been. That was the moment she understood. No matter what she achieved, it would never be enough, and no matter how badly Lucas failed, it would never truly matter. She was the unwanted trophy. Lucas was the cherished disaster. She put the trophy back into her bag. She never took it out again. A bitter laugh almost escaped Clara's lips in the present. At the party, she looked at her father, Victor, now staring at her with pure rage. Real problems, she thought. Her father didn't even know what real problems were. She did. Down to the numbers. Over the past 2 years, after Clara quietly founded her own company, Clara had begun paying attention to Victor Construction, her father's business. It was a respected name, or so it appeared. Clara's firm, Sentinel Data Analytics, specialized in financial risk analysis and due diligence. Through industry whispers, she started hearing troubling rumors: unpaid suppliers, stalled projects. Curious, she ordered her team to conduct a discreet investigation. What they found made her nauseous. The company was bleeding, not just from operational losses, but from internal sabotage. Her gaze shifted to Lucas. Lucas, who had been given the title of Director of Business Development after failing out of 3 different universities. Lucas, who had unrestricted access to company accounts. Her team found the trail. At first, small transfers, representation expenses, ghost consultants. Then the amounts grew larger as his confidence grew. Hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned into shell companies. When traced, every single one led back to one person, Lucas. The money funded his lifestyle, luxury rental cars, since he was no longer allowed to drive company vehicles, parties in Las Vegas, expensive watches like the one he had just given their parents, a watch effectively bought with money he had stolen from them. Victor had no idea. He was old school. He trusted his son. He signed whatever Lucas put in front of him. Now the company stood on the brink of absolute collapse. Supplier debts had piled up into the millions. Banks refused new credit lines. 6 months earlier, Victor put the house as collateral for a massive personal loan, one last attempt to inject cash into a sinking ship. That loan? Lucas drained 30% of it within the first 2 months. "You look pale, Lucas," Clara said calmly in the garden. Her voice carried clearly. "Why? Worried I might mention Bright Horizon Holdings?" The name was one of Lucas's primary shell companies. The color drained from Lucas's face. He stammered, I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" Clara asked. "Because I have copies of every bank transfer." Now Victor turned to his son. "Lucas, what is she talking about?" "She's lying," Lucas shouted, panic rising. "She's just jealous because you love me more." "Yes," Clara said quietly, "that must be it." She turned from Lucas and looked at her mother, who stared back as if Clara was a monster. Helena's words echoed again. "The child we never wanted." Ironically, that status had saved her. The expulsion had been subtle, but final. Right after Clara graduated top of her class in college, an achievement that again went nearly unnoticed, her parents sat her down. "You're an adult now," Victor said, businesslike. "We've paid for your education. It's time you become independent." "Lucas will stay here," Helena added. "He'll help with your father's business." "But you," she said sharply, "you need to learn how to survive in the real world." It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. They gave her 1 month's rent for a cramped studio apartment and told her good luck. They expected her to fail. She knew that. They expected a call within 3 months, tears, begging to come back, ready to accept any role they offered, maybe a junior accountant at her father's company, forever in Lucas's shadow. Clara took the money. She never called. The first months were hell. She lived on instant noodles, worked 2 jobs, data entry in the day, tutoring at night. She saved every dollar. At her data entry job, she met Aaron. Aaron was a brilliant data analyst, socially awkward but razor sharp. He saw something in Clara. Her mind, her ability to see patterns others missed. "You're too smart for this job," he told her one day. "I know," Clara replied. They started working on side projects together, analyzing stock market trends for small investors. Within 6 months, their side work earned more than their salaries. A year later, they quit. They rented an office the size of a closet. Sentinel Data Analytics was born. Clara was the brain. Aaron was the technical architect. They didn't sleep. They worked 18-hour days. While Lucas spent money, Clara invested it. While Lucas partied, Clara coded. Their first major client came 2 years earlier, a hedge fund suspicious about an acquisition. Clara's team dove into the data and uncovered massive fraud. They saved the client hundreds of millions of dollars. Their reputation exploded. Now, Clara sat as CEO of a company valued beyond anything her father had ever imagined. She lived in a penthouse she bought outright. She quietly became a force in the city's financial world. And no one in her family knew. They were too busy with their small, fake world to ask. When she arrived at family events in a modest rental car, they saw failure. When she wore simple clothing, custom silk, no logos, they saw a lack of effort. They never asked. They only assumed. And Clara let them. She realized years ago that her success was no longer for them. It was for herself. It was her freedom.
Originally, the plan was different. She would let them fail. She would let the bank take the house. She would let Lucas go to prison for embezzlement. But something changed. Maybe it was Aaron's compassion. "They're still your parents, Clara," Aaron said. "Destroying them won't heal you." So she changed the plan. She wouldn't let them be destroyed. She would save them, but on her terms. She began quietly buying Victor Construction's debts from suppliers at a discount using her company. She became her father's largest creditor anonymously. Then she waited. She waited for the mortgage loan to mature. The garden now felt like a courtroom. The guests were no longer partygoers. They were jurors. "You're lying," Lucas shouted again, desperation creeping into his voice. "You have nothing. You're just jealous because you love me more." Victor whispered to Helena, panic cracking his confidence. "Stop her. Call security. Throw her out." Victor looked at Clara, confusion and anger twisting his face. She was no longer the obedient daughter he knew. "Clara, this is your final warning. Leave." Clara smiled, a tired smile. "I can't, Dad," she said softly. "I still have to give you my gift." She turned to the crowd. "Do you know the most ironic part of my father's insult?" She looked straight at Victor. "Take your cheap gift and leave. This party, this luxury, you're really going all out for your final performance." "What do you mean?" Victor demanded. "I know you used this house as collateral for a short-term loan from Sentinel Bank 6 months ago." Victor's jaw tightened. "That's confidential. And I also know," Clara continued evenly, "that the final balloon payment was due 3 days ago." Helena turned to her husband, fear flooding her eyes. "Victor, what is she talking about? You said the loan was extended." "She's lying," Victor roared. "The business is just a little tight, but everything's under control." "Under control," Clara echoed. "Huh." She laughed, this time a truly sad laugh. "Dad, Sentinel Bank has already..."
Do you all know what's going to happen the day after tomorrow? Monday morning, 10 a.m. Clara didn't need to answer. The pure terror slowly crawling across Victor's face told everyone everything they needed to know. "You know this party isn't a celebration," Clara said softly now, her voice calm, lethal. "This is a farewell party, your last party in this house." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Because the day after tomorrow," she continued, delivering the sentence like a verdict, "the sheriff will arrive. This house is no longer legally yours. It was sold in a closed auction last week." Helena staggered. She grabbed the arm of a chair to steady herself. "Victor," she whispered desperately, "tell me she's lying. Tell me she's lying." Victor couldn't speak. He could only stare at Clara, gasping for air. His entire facade, his entire world, collapsed in front of 100 pairs of eyes. Clara looked at her broken parents. She looked at Lucas, trembling in fear. Then, calmly, she placed her hand back on the black velvet box. "Are you ready for my gift?" The silence in the backyard felt suffocating, thick, heavy, like velvet pressed over everyone's mouths. The distant sound of crickets, once unnoticed, now screamed in the stillness. The guests who had been whispering froze. They no longer pretended to be polite. Their eyes darted between Clara, calm and composed, Victor, ashen and shaking, and Helena, trembling with a new mix of fear and rage. "She's lying," Helena whispered to her husband, uncertainty bleeding into her voice. "Victor, she's lying, right? Tell them she's lying." Victor said nothing. He knew she wasn't lying. He didn't know how Clara knew it, but he knew the letters from Sentinel Bank were real. The final notice had come, and he had ignored it, hoping for a miracle or another loan Lucas had promised would appear. "Are you still waiting for me to leave?" Clara asked. Her hand moved to the silver ribbon on the box. The soft sound of satin sliding filled the air as she untied it slowly, deliberately. "Stop her, Victor!" Helena screamed. "Call security! Throw her out of our house!" "Your house?" Clara raised an eyebrow, a thin, painful smile forming. "I think we just discussed that." She lifted the lid of the black velvet box. All eyes locked onto its contents. There was no glitter, no stacks of cash. Clara reached inside and removed the first item. It caught the garden lights, an antique silver hand mirror, intricately carved, elegant, beautiful, and clearly not worth millions. Lucas let out a nervous laugh. "A mirror?" he scoffed. "After all that drama, you give them a mirror?" He turned to his father. "See, Dad? She's lost it. She made all that nonsense up." Victor didn't look relieved. He looked worse. Clara ignored Lucas and stepped toward her mother, who backed up until she hit her ornate chair. "My first gift," Clara said softly. She held the mirror up. "For you, Mom." Helena turned her face away. "I don't want it." "Look," Clara insisted, her voice hardening. She gripped Helena's chin and forced her to face her own reflection. It was shocking, an act of dominance Clara had never shown in her entire life. In the mirror, Helena saw herself, her makeup smeared with cold sweat, her eyes wild with fear, her lips trembling. The face of a terrified woman, not the queen of a party. "Look at yourself," Clara whispered. "Look at what your pride and cruelty have done." She moved the mirror to Victor, who stared at his reflection in numb disbelief. "Look at yourself, Dad. A man so weak, so terrified of his own failure that you chose to humiliate your daughter instead of admitting you destroyed everything." Then Clara turned the mirror to Lucas. "And you, look at yourself. A parasite, a coward hiding behind expensive suits bought with stolen money." She placed the mirror gently on the table. "My first gift is the truth," she said to her parents, "something this house has never had. I want you to see the monsters you created." "Nonsense!" Victor finally shouted, rage fueled by humiliation. "You think you can come here and insult us with cheap metaphors?" "Oh, this isn't a metaphor," Clara cut in calmly. "That was only the first layer." She turned back to the box. "You called my gift cheap. Maybe because real gifts don't sparkle. Real gifts are heavy." She reached inside and pulled out a thick stack of documents, neatly bound with a black ribbon, at least 2 inches thick. She didn't hand them over. She dropped them on the table in front of Victor. Whump! The glasses nearby rattled. "What is this?" Victor asked, his hands shaking. "That," Clara replied to the frozen guests, "is reality." Victor untied the ribbon. The top document bore the letterhead of Sentinel Bank. He read it. His face went from pale to ash gray. "That," Clara explained to the frozen guests, "is the final foreclosure notice. The balloon payment I mentioned, missed 3 days ago, officially in default." She pointed to the next document. "Those are overdue invoices from Steel Core Industries. They're filing for bankruptcy proceedings against Victor Construction next Tuesday. I know because my lawyer spoke with theirs this morning." Helena began to sob. "Victor, is that true?" Victor ignored her, frantically flipping through the pages. Unpaid cement suppliers, heavy equipment leases, union warnings for unpaid wages. Every lie of his life exposed on the table. "And my favorite," Clara said, pulling out a single sheet. "This is a copy of the company credit card transaction under Lucas's name." She held it up. 3 days ago, a luxury watch boutique in New York City. Quite the price tag. She tossed it at Lucas. "And look at the status below. Transaction declined. Credit limit exceeded." "You couldn't even properly pay for your stolen watch." The guests
guests gasped. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "The watch is fake." "It's not fake," Lucas screeched. I used another card." "Oh, really?" Clara replied coolly, because this stack also includes reports from every one of Dad's credit cards, all maxed out. She gestured around the garden. "So tell me, what exactly paid for this party?" Silence. Victor clutched the table, looking like he might collapse. "You slander!" Lucas finally snapped. His face burned red with rage and humiliation. "You scheming bitch! Who do you think you are?" He lunged at Clara, hand raised to strike. Helena screamed. But Lucas never reached her. A man stepped out of the crowd, plain suit, perfect fit, who had been standing silently near a pillar. He moved fast, too fast. He stepped in front of Clara and caught Lucas's wrist mid-air with one hand. His grip was steel. "I strongly suggest you stay where you are, Mr. Lucas," the man said calmly. "Let go of me!" Lucas yelled. "Who the hell are you?" "He's with me," Clara said from behind him. "His name is Adrian." "Well, actually, he's not Adrian. He's my head of private security." "My best friend Adrian is very thorough. He suspected the golden child might do something stupid and violent." The man released Lucas with a controlled shove. Lucas stumbled backward onto the stage, humiliated, terrified. He stared at Clara in pure fear. She was no longer his weak little sister. She was a strategist who anticipated every move. "Slander!" Lucas croaked weakly. "Slander?" Clara repeated softly. "You sure you want to stick with that word?" She returned to the box one last time. At the bottom lay a last bundle, thick like a doctoral thesis, and a small silver USB drive. She placed them on the table. "Along with these unpaid bills," she said, her voice carrying across the garden, "is a complete forensic audit report from Sentinel Analytics, my company. It details the operations of False Beacon LLC, Evergreen Solutions LLC, and 3 other shell companies you created." She flipped open the first page. "Let's look at the summary. For the past 24 months, the total amount illegally transferred from Victor Construction into your accounts is $500,000. The silence became hollow. "That much?" Helena whispered, staring at her son in horror. "Lucas, tell me she's lying." Lucas trembled, leaning against the stage. I was just borrowing it. I was going to pay it back." "Your business doesn't exist," Clara shouted. "No investors from San Francisco, no app, only bank accounts in the Cayman Islands and nightclub."
She then turned to her father. Victor had collapsed into his chair, his face buried in his hands. "Dad," Clara said quietly, "on page 30, you'll find copies of the 5 largest initial transfers. Your signature is on every one of them." Victor lifted his head. His eyes were red and swollen. I didn't, he stammered. "You didn't know what you were signing, did you?" Clara finished calmly. "Lucas told you they were for project expenses, and you signed. You were too busy, too proud, and too trusting of your crown prince. You never bothered to audit even once. That," she said softly, "was the final nail in Lucas's coffin. The betrayal was now absolute." Victor looked at his son. There was no anger left in his eyes, only cold emptiness. The devastation of a father realizing that the child he worshipped was the one who destroyed him. The guests began to move. This was no longer a party. It was a crime scene. Several of Victor's most important business associates quietly slipped out through the side gate, faces stiff and averted. They wanted no connection to embezzlement or bankruptcy. The party dissolved in humiliating silence. Within 5 minutes, only the family remained. Victor, broken. Helena, hysterically crying. Lucas,
curled up on the stage steps, his head buried between his knees. The suited security man stood silently near the garden exit. "So," Clara said into the silence, broken only by her mother's sobs, "that's the situation." Her voice was no longer cold or angry, only tired. "You're completely bankrupt. This house will be taken. And Lucas," she glanced at her brother, "if I submit this report to the authorities, he will go to prison for at least 10 years. She turned away, as if her work were finished, and picked up her handbag. "Don't!" The sound came as a hoarse scream from Helena. She lunged forward, grabbing Clara's arm. "Clara, please don't go. Don't leave us like this." Clara stopped. She looked down at her mother's hand gripping her arm. "Why not?" she asked quietly. "I'm the unwanted child. My gift was cheap. You told me to leave. Twice. We were wrong." The voice came from Victor. Using the last of his strength, he stood, bracing himself against the table. We were blind. We didn't know. My God, Clara, we didn't know." "No," Clara said, pulling her arm free. "You didn't want to know. You were too busy hating me because I wasn't Lucas." She walked back to the table, back to the black box that now looked ominous. "You insulted my gift, before you even saw what was at the bottom." She reached into the box one last time. Beneath the false velvet lining lay a final folder. It was thick, navy blue, and neatly sealed. She didn't throw it. She opened it carefully. Dad said the house would be seized the day after tomorrow. He was wrong. Victor looked up. A desperate flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. "You mean the bank gave me an extension?" "No," Clara replied. "They wouldn't. I know, because I tried to negotiate on your behalf 3 weeks ago. They refused." She removed a document. "The foreclosure was canceled because the loan was paid in full last week." Victor's eyes widened. "Paid in full? Who paid it? Lucas?" He looked at his son, but Lucas didn't lift his head. "Of course not," Clara said. "A private buyer stepped in, paid off the remaining balance, and purchased the property directly from the bank before it ever reached auction." She pulled out a second document. It was thick, stamped, and notarized. "This," she said, "is the new deed. The title to this property, this house, this garden." She placed it on the table facing them. Victor and Helena leaned forward, eyes swollen with tears, squinting at the typed name beneath buyer. They read it together. Their lips moved silently. "Clara Anindita Pierce?" It took several seconds for their shattered minds to process it. "You," Helena whispered, her breath catching. "You bought it?" "The house you used to humiliate me," Clara said evenly. "The house you bragged about to your friends. Legally, it's mine." Victor staggered back, searching for a chair, then collapsed into it. His gaze moved from the deed to the evidence of Lucas's embezzlement, then to his daughter. His failed daughter. His cheap daughter. The debts. The suppliers. Steel Core Industries. They'll destroy me. "This blue folder," Clara said, pointing to the one still in her hand, "contains something else." She pulled out several letters. "These are clearance statements from all major creditors of Victor Construction, Steel Core Industries, cement suppliers, heavy equipment leasing firms, all settled." Helena stared at her, confused. "But how?" "I didn't pay their debts," Clara corrected calmly, her voice now unmistakably that of a CEO. "My company acquired the liabilities. Technically, Victor Construction now owes millions to me." She paused. "But I've frozen the debt indefinitely. So yes, the company survives, and the family name you guarded so fiercely remains intact." She placed the folder atop the house deed. "This is my gift," she said quietly. Your anniversary gift wasn't the mirror. It wasn't the bills. Those were receipts. My gift is your lives, your reputation, your son's freedom. I bought them back for you. Silence. Then a sound rose. Not restrained sobbing, a deep, broken wail. Helena slipped from her grip on Clara. Her luxurious maroon gown pooled around her as she collapsed to her knees on the cold marble floor. She didn't faint. She crawled, like a beggar. She crossed the final few feet and clutched the hem of Clara's navy silk dress. She pressed her tear-soaked face against Clara's knees. "Clara, my child, my baby, forgive me. God forgive me. I was blind. I was cruel. Please, don't hate me." It was an ugly cry, a desperate one, a cry that tore apart the last remnants of her dignity. Victor, the proud man who once ordered Clara to leave, bowed his head. His body shook violently. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He fell to his knees beside his wife. He couldn't look at Clara. He stared at the floor before her feet. "We were wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I was a failure as a father. I failed at everything. Please, forgive us." Under the still glowing party lights, among untouched gourmet dishes, both parents knelt on the floor, begging for mercy at the feet of the unwanted child. The sounds that filled the garden were the worst kind. Not screams of rage, but the raw moans of despair. Helena's sobs echoed painfully among cooling plates. Victor's quiet weeping was the sound of a man who had lost everything. Not just money, but dignity. Clara stood motionless. Her silk dress clenched in her mother's trembling hands. She looked down at the bowed heads of her parents. This was the moment she had imagined in 1,000 nightmares and revenge fantasies. The moment they finally saw her. The moment they finally regretted it. But now that it had arrived, she felt nothing. No victory, no satisfaction, no anger. Only a vast, aching emptiness. They weren't apologizing for 30 years of pain. They were apologizing because she held the reins. Because she had the money, the house, Lucas's freedom. This wasn't love. It was surrender. Her gaze drifted past them to the suited security man standing calmly near the gate. A silent witness. Professional, unreadable. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Stand up," she said. Her voice was not warm. It was not cold. It was empty. The voice of a CEO closing an unpleasant negotiation. The pleas stopped. Helena and Victor rose slowly, awkwardly. They looked old. In minutes, their masks of grandeur had melted away, revealing two frightened, broken, middle-aged people. Helena's makeup ran like smeared watercolors. Victor's expensive suit was wrinkled, as if he'd slept in it for a week. "Mom," Clara said, gently but firmly, removing her arm from Helena's grasp. "Stop. This is embarrassing." Clara turned and walked toward the figure she had nearly forgotten. Lucas remained curled up on the stage steps, shaking like a trapped animal beside the remains of the anniversary cake. She stood over him, her shadow engulfing him. $500,000, Clara said softly, repeating the number. "That's a lot."
Theo nodded once. "Of course, Miss Clara." He turned and walked silently out of the garden, leaving the four of them behind in their private ruin. The departure of the last witness made the silence even heavier. Now there was nothing left but naked truth. Victor was the first to break the quiet. He wiped his face with a trembling handkerchief. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a single hour. His voice was hoarse. "I don't know what to say, Clara." Clara simply waited. She was not going to hand out forgiveness cheaply. She would not say, "It's okay, Dad," because it wasn't okay. It never had been. Victor stared at his calloused hands, the hands that had built a company from nothing, the same hands that had nearly destroyed it. I was always jealous of you. The confession was so quiet, Clara almost didn't hear it. What? She asked. Jealous, Victor repeated, louder this time. He looked at his daughter, and for the first time, Clara saw something raw and painfully honest in his eyes. Since you were little, you never needed me. You were smart, independent. You passed your exams, you won your trophies, you did everything on your own. He coughed, a bitter laugh clawing its way out of his throat. And Lucas, he gestured weakly at his son, who was still shaking on the steps. He was the opposite. He needed me for everything. Every bad grade, every problem, every debt, he always came to me. And I liked that. It made me feel necessary. His voice cracked. He is my failure. I knew it. Deep down, I always knew he was weak, but I couldn't accept it. So I kept pouring money into him, trust, love, hoping somehow I could turn him into the man I wanted him to be. Clara listened, her chest heavy. And you, Victor continued, his eyes returning to her, every time you succeeded, every time you proved you didn't need me, it felt like a slap in the face. It reminded me that I had invested in the wrong asset, that I had ignored my best one in favor of my worst one. He swallowed. It was easier to call you a disappointment, easier to ignore your achievements than to admit that I, the great patriarch, had failed completely as a father. Clara processed his words. It was the most selfish confession she had ever heard. She hadn't been punished for being bad. She had been punished for being good. So softly, Clara said, letting her words echo back at him. So you destroyed me to protect your ego? Victor couldn't deny it. He lowered his head. I did too. Helena suddenly spoke up. Her sobs had faded into broken, uneven breaths. I was wrong too. Clara turned to her. And what was your reason, Mom? Did I remind you of your failures too? Helena flinched. Then, to Clara's surprise, she nodded. Yes. Why? Clara asks. The question that had burned inside her for 30 years. Why did you hate me so much? Helena stared blankly at the pool, illuminated by soft lights. I didn't hate you, she whispered. I was afraid of you. Before I married your father, I was smart, like you. I had ambition, I wanted my own business, I wanted to be someone. She touched the diamond necklace around her neck, which now felt more like a shackle. But I chose the easy road. I married your father. He was successful, stable. I became Mrs. Victor. My life became charity luncheons, social status, managing appearances. She looked at Lucas with a gaze torn between love and resentment. Lucas is weak. He needs me. He lets me control him, spoil him. He makes me feel important. Then her eyes shifted to Clara, and her expression grew complicated. But you, she continued, her now bruised and muddled gaze almost unable to focus on Clara. But you never needed me. You read on your own, you studied on your own, you had your own world. You were strong, independent. You were the woman I should have been. Fresh tears slid down her face. Every time I looked at you, I saw everything I had sacrificed. I saw the strong woman I buried inside myself. And I hated you for it. I hated you for making me feel small. Calling you unwanted, insulting you, that was my way, my only way, to make you smaller than me so I could feel better about my empty life. That confession hit Clara harder than any insult ever had. It had never been about her, not once. She had spent her entire life trying to earn the love of two people who were too consumed by their own demons to see her. A father haunted by failure, a mother haunted by lost ambition. They weren't parents. They were hollow shells filled with regret. A long silence followed.
Only Lucas's quiet sobbing broke the night. And then Clara understood everything. With that understanding came a cold, unfamiliar peace. Victor looked even more shattered after hearing his wife's confession. But then something else ignited in his eyes. The fire of a businessman who could still see opportunity in ruin. He looked at Clara not as his daughter, but as a force. "Clara," he said, his voice hoarse, regaining a fragment of his former authority. "You saved the company. You bought its debt. You own this house. You're brilliant." It was the first genuine praise he'd ever heard from him, and it came 30 years too late. "You should take over," Victor continued, desperation creeping into his voice. "Victor Construction Group, you can run it. You can clean it up, rebuild it. You know how this works. I know it, you know it." Helena immediately caught on to the shift. She grabbed Clara's hand again, this time not in despair, but in hope. "Yes, sweetheart, this is destiny. You saved us. You can move back home. Your room is still the same. We can be a family again, a whole family." She inhaled sharply. "We'll make it up to you, I promise. Your father and I will do whatever you say. And Lucas," she glanced at her pitiful son, "he'll work for you. He'll be your assistant. He'll learn. Won't he?" she urged. Lucas lifted his head. His red, swollen eyes clung to this absurd sliver of hope. "Yes, Clara, I'll do anything. I'll clean floors if I have to." Clara looked at them. This was the final test. They hadn't changed. They adapted. They lost their dignity, so they latched on to the next thing. They saw her strength, her intelligence, her money. They didn't want their daughter back. They wanted a savior, a CEO, a banker. They were trying to imprison her again, this time not with insults, but with guilt and obligation. Clara gently pulled her hand free and smiled, the same smile as before, a smile filled with painful irony. "You really still don't understand," she said softly. She walked back to the table where the black velvet box lay beside the damning folders. She picked up the empty box and held it in her hands. "I did this for you," she said clearly. Her voice sliced cleanly through their hope. "I didn't save the company for you, Dad. I have my own company, far more profitable and far cleaner than anything you ever built. I didn't save this house for you, Mom. I hate this house. Every corner of it is filled with bad memories." She turned to face them, holding the empty box against her chest like a shield. "I did this for one reason. For myself." Their faces fell. "I did it for the 16-year-old girl who came home with a silver trophy and was told to step aside. I did it for the young woman who graduated summa cum laude and was never asked about her thesis. I did it so I could stand here tonight holding your entire fake world in my hands." She lifted the empty box slightly. "Realize how meaningless it is to me. I don't want it." She placed the empty box back on the table with a soft sound. "Clara?" Victor whispered, fear flooding back into his voice. What are you going to do to us?" "You're asking what I'll do?" Clara replied. She reached into her handbag and pulled out one final set of documents. "Simple. This is what we're going to do." She placed them beside the empty box. "You may continue living here, in my house." She slid the papers toward them. "This is a lease agreement. Rent is $70 a month. Very cheap," she added coolly. "A fitting gift in return for a cheap gift, don't you think?" Their eyes widened in horror. Tenants in their own house. "And the company," Clara continued, "I am your primary creditor. I won't call in the debt on one condition." She turned to Lucas. Lucas stopped breathing. "Dad will report Lucas to the police." "No!" Helena screamed, rushing forward. "Sit down," Clara ordered. The authority in her voice froze Helena in place. "Dad will report him for embezzlement of $5.6 million. I'm not interested in destroying the family name. It's inconvenient. He will report him for internal fraud on a minor scale. Enough to convict him, enough to give him a criminal record, enough for 5 years of probation." She looked directly at Lucas. He needs to learn that actions have consequences. Then she turned to Victor. And you will spend the rest of your life running that company honestly under constant supervision.